Hey YouTube, Jeff checking in. In today's video, I wanted to talk to you about how to shoot a city for the purposes of Microstock. Now, I'm a Microstock photographer that focuses primarily on travel photography. And so I thought it would be a great idea to kind of walk through how I approach a city when I'm, or it could be another attraction, it doesn't just have to be a city, but when I'm visiting for the purposes of travel. So that's what I want to do. Hopefully this will help you with your travel photography, if that's what you're focused on in Microstock. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the city of Edinburgh as a case study. So it's a city that I visited recently before the COVID lockdown, and I'll show you the things that I photographed and how I approached it, like the thoughts behind it, and then the resulting images. And at the end, what I'll do is I'll give you a little description of what I thought has sold well, or what actually has sold well, and then I'll even maybe show you a few images that I thought might do okay, but then really didn't. So that's the plan for this video. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about these in any particular order. I'm just going to start in with one approach that I take, and then I'll throw up some shots and I'll move on to the next one. So the first thing that I focus on is generic architecture. And I'm not talking about generic architecture in terms of not being nondescript. I'm talking about it in terms of being just characteristic for the area. So architecture that might resemble or feature a certain city or region, but it's not really a specific building per se, or a specific landmark or anything that's necessarily famous. Just external or exterior or interior images that have that characteristics of the city that you're in. So I always like to focus on shooting that stuff, and you can shoot that all the time. You can photograph that everywhere. So what I do is I typically research in advance what the architectural style is for the city, and then I look at shooting those generic shots that I can upload to my portfolio. So for Edinburgh, there's really two kind of main areas that I sort of read about in advance, and one was in the old town Edinburgh. There's this sort of Gothic and neo-Gothic old city, which is made of stone and looks kind of medieval. It's pretty cool. And then in the new town, there's Georgian architecture, so a different style of architecture, completely built in different periods. And both of those neighborhoods are quite famous. And so I intentionally focused on making sure I had architectural examples photographed from both of those areas. And then the second layer on top of that is what I try to do images that are both commercial oriented and editorial oriented. So I'll look to take shots that don't have logos or trademarked artwork in them, just to ensure that it remains royalty-free oriented. And then I also I will also take editorial style photos of the same thing, even though those don't typically sell well, because the generic is better in a royalty-free space. Simply because there's nothing specific that a buyer might want about it. But I still do both because it's important to do it. And then the third layer on top of that, when you're doing that, is just focus on trying to do some that have copy space and some that don't. So get both of those. You know, take the shots where there's some blue sky in the background that, or some part of the facade that's fairly nondescript that a buyer can use to include copy type, and that way you get sort of everything covered. And my last tip on this kind of stuff, and this actually goes through most of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, is I like to, for stock anyway, I like to get images that are taken when the weather's pretty decent. I like nice weather. I've always found that bad weather, that doesn't really work as well for travel and tourism. I think people want the cities to look nice and warm and inviting, and not necessarily dark skies and cold and stuff. Sometimes you don't have a choice, right? But so I always try to get shots that are nice. Nice weather shots, nice light shots. Always try to get great light when you're doing these photos. So like really think about a postcard style image. You can use the moody weather for your fine art or your personal projects, but for stock, nice weather helps turn these generic sort of architectural photos into something that's really a buyable commodity. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about is landmarks. Now this might be a little bit more obvious, but there are strategies to photographing landmarks that I use and I think might be able to help you. First of all, I always research the area, know it really well, and go on Google Maps or Google Earth if you have it or whatever you have, and see if you can, especially for the main attractions, try to walk it on Google Earth or Google Maps, whatever, before going, and that way you can sort of get a view of the attraction. You get a sense of its best angles. You know where some of the best shots might be. You might even be able to pre-visualize some of the shots that you want. And when you're on a family vacation, you often don't have time to do much in the way of scouting. And so if you can scout online, that's a great way to do it. And you can look at other photographers on stock photography as well, or just Google Images or what have you, to get a sense of how to shoot an area and how to really use your time to your best when you're looking at these types of attractions. The other thing that I'll say is I use photographers and ephemeris just to try to get a sense of what the light's going to be like on the day that I'm there, assuming that it's not cloudy. And then, you can sneakily kind of adjust your family's arrival times. You don't even have to tell them, right? You're going to show up at this attraction at the best possible time for lighting, early morning or whatever it is, or based on your research, based on what you know of the building. So you can make that work actually if you're pretty well researched in advance of showing up. Okay, the other thing is if they are important landmarks, and if you do visit them with your family, that's great. But you might also keep a list of things that you're going to come back to. So those times when you get off from your family time, maybe you get up early when they're still in bed sleeping, or if you're on your own, you get up early, late, sunset, sunrise. Just keep a mental list and then come back to those main sites. Use your walking around with your family as a scouting opportunity, and do that so that the family time is actually scouting time. They don't even need to know. And then you come back later and you try to photograph that with more of a photographer's eye and approach. The other thing I'll say about attractions is to make sure you take a full series of images. Work the attraction from front to back to side. Get the best images that you can get. Get a variety of images, not just a whole bunch that are very similar. Inside, outside, sunrise, sunset, panoramas, just single shots. Shoot the major attractions really, really well. Get multiple angles. Include copy space in some. Just do it in a way that you have the most optionality for potential buyers. Never go narrow with those kind of things. The other thing I'll say with attractions is go for second tier and third tier attractions as well, because they may not be as photographed as some of the main attractions. So in Edinburgh Castle is very photographed. The Royal Mile is very photographed. St. Giles Cathedral, very photographed. But there are other attractions in the city that may not be photographed as much, and there may be less coverage. So you want to always do your research, look at second tier, third tier attractions that might be of interest to buyers. And one thing that I do is I always look to see if there's a hop on, hop off tour in the area, whether it's a bus or a boat tour. And then I just get the pamphlet and I look at the pamphlet and I look at attractions that are within walking distance of the stops along the tour. And those kind of things are, someone's done all the thinking for you. Those are the areas and the things that people are going to want to see. And that's why the bus stops there. And so extrapolating from that, that's what some of the purchasers of these types of images, some of these images will also want to buy and to use to generate interest in the area. So that's a tip that I do. So hopefully that will be something of interest to you. You can do it all kinds of ways, but yeah, that's one of them. So, okay, so the third thing that I wanted to talk about is entertainment, businesses, and lodgings. Now, particularly these days, there's a desire to attract people with more than just attractions that you typically would think about when you're visiting somewhere. So in Edinburgh, like the castle, right? A lot of people travel now for cultural reasons, such as food. Foodie travel is huge. People travel for local cultural food. Drinks, for example, Scotland's a great one because it has the whiskey. There's all kinds of reasons people travel. And also for shopping. People are, especially depending on which countries they come from and how expensive things are and how much access there is to commodities, people will often travel for shopping. So that's also important. And then people are also staying in places where they arrive, and people want to see what those places look like. There's all kinds of ways to do this. So what I always do is I look at the areas that are most popular or most trendy. And these often have a good mix of commercial and, the restaurants and the patios and these sort of food fair places. And so, for example, in Edinburgh, there's a few very popular areas like the Grassmarket, Cockburn Street, the Royal Mile. These popular areas are also just littered with popular patios and restaurants. So I always photograph as many of those as I can. I try to get some unique angles. I try to get sort of the wide shots and then some of the narrow shots, close ins, just to get those details. Street life along these pedestrian streets where there are the patios. So, and those tend to be, or they can be less photographed than some of the big attractions. So keep that in mind as well. And then same with some of the commercial establishments. So you're going somewhere, there's, markets or tourist gift shops, unique places to buy stuff. These things also end up in travel brochures and on websites and convention materials. So don't forget about that kind of thing. Same with lodging. If you can photograph landmark hotels that are very popular, those get in because, or those are sold, or those are purchased by buyers because they want to sort of show potential visitors, the kind of accommodations that you can expect in the city. And then, like, some of these places are actually tourist attractions in their own right. So those are the hotels that you really want to focus on. If you can photograph a hotel that's not just a place to stay, but also a tourist attraction, like the Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh. It's a beautiful hotel with a big clock tower. It's fantastic at night and it's fantastic in the day. And so always try to think of a microstock or a photograph that has multiple uses and try to take that one over one that has maybe a narrower scope of use. Okay, and sort of following on from that last point, the next thing I just wanted to say is what I also try to photograph is the local culture. Every place is different, whether it's a city or a small town or a region. There's different cultural if there are artifacts or characteristics of place that are different that make it worth visiting. And people are really into cultural travel now. So you always want to make sure that you look and think about what makes that place unique. What's different about the culture? What separates it from the city down the road? Like, what is it? What is it that attracted you? And try to focus that stuff. For example, in Edinburgh, the piper who is busker, that's what I always kind of find it attractive about a Scottish city. You have these amazing musicians out on the street playing the pipes, and it's super awesome. And like this example here of this piper on the Royal Mile, that actually ended up on the most recent cover. It was a back cover of Rick Steves' most recent guide for, I think it was Scotland or Edinburgh. I can't remember if it was Edinburgh or Scotland, but this one ended up on a pretty famous guidebook cover. So that was pretty awesome. But always focus on how you can build in photographs of the local culture into your shooting strategy whenever you arrive at a city, because every city is unique. And that just adds to the layers of images that you capture that you can utilize in building a well-rounded portfolio that's going to at least catch some attention somewhere. And that's what you want to do. You want someone clicking on your photo. You want them seeing the list of related images from your own portfolio that then they might explore into. So don't forget culture. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to talk about was indoor environments. So a lot of what I talked about is kind of outside travel photography, but always, remember to shoot indoors as well. Because a lot of the times the travel photographers, they're out shooting outside. They're shooting the big landmarks or local environment, outdoors, sunrise, sunset. So, for example, one of the people that I like on YouTube that I follow and I have for a while is Brendan Benson. And if you watch his videos, he's almost always shooting outdoors. So if you want to sort of build a portfolio that sets you apart, don't forget about inside. One of my best-selling images that I took in Edinburgh was taken inside of the Scottish, I think it's a National Museum. I had this memory lapse in my last video on best-selling images, but this is an image of Dolly the sheep. But so I always try to take those photos inside, and I always do it when I'm with my family. So because it's easy to do. Sometimes there's rules, and you can also research that in advance. Like, for example, cathedrals, other important attractions will often have special rules on professional photography, use of tripods. Those are almost always on websites, and you can almost always research them in advance. And it's important to do it just for the lazy fact of not carrying your tripod if you can't use it anyway. And so always know in advance. St. Giles Cathedral, they allow you to use tripods if you pay your, I think it was I can't remember what it was £5 or something, which is a small price to pay to get the chance to shoot a beautiful cathedral like St. Giles. Even if you're not even going to sell that stuff, you still want to do it as a photographer. It's just awesome. So I always know in advance where I'm going to be able to shoot interiors on a tripod. But always shoot interiors, shoot them in museums, shoot them in art galleries, cathedrals, like I said. Just do it, and that'll help set your portfolio apart even more. And you never know which is going to be the one that catches on, like my Dolly the sheep shot. So, do that as well. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about is I always look in advance for the best skyline photo opportunities in the city. I do it while I'm with my family. I think I'm always looking around to see where is this skyline going to look best from? Where should I shoot it? How can I get up high on things? I'm lucky that my daughter loves to go up to the top of all the cathedrals. You can climb up the medieval staircase up to the top and walk around the edge. I'm actually a bit scared of heights, so it sort of freaks me out, but her enthusiasm to get up there pushes me to get up on those spots. So I've taken great skyline photos from hills, In Edinburgh, there's Calton Hill, obviously, very famous. You'll probably be shooting from here too if you're a travel photographer and you're visiting. But then there's also the Walter Scott Monument. It's a great place to photograph the skyline from. I even took photos from the Ferris wheel along Princess Street Gardens because it took you up pretty high. So you can do that. And I do a lot of panos handheld from those high places like the Walter Scott Monument. So when you can get up to a height that changes the perspective from the daily or sort of average view that a tourist might take, always take it and always shoot from those locations. And the same rules apply basically. Know the light, know when the light is going to be best for the direction you want to face. Google Earth it, Google Maps it, walk and look at the places that you're going to visit, know the times of day, know everything that you can know in advance. Sometimes the weather doesn't work out and you get kicked in the butt on that, but that's just reality and that's how it's always going to be. You just work around it. And even when the weather's not great, shoot it anyway, throw it up. You never know what's going to happen. So that's what I do. And then the other thing is I like the skyline shots. They're nice for sunset and sunrise, so I often will hold off on those, or if I do get a morning or an evening, I'll try to make or dedicate those times to those best skyline shots because they provide the big context shots for the city, and they're always very popular. And because they're popular, that's also means there's more competition there. So that's when you want to be without your family and you have the time to focus on composing really well, looking for the best angles, looking for interests that someone else might have missed. That's really when you want to engage in those sort of slow photographer approaches to travel photography that you might not do when your family's around. So hopefully this overview of my approach to shooting Edinburgh will help you with your travel photography when you're planning and you're executing your strategy. Now, as I said, I will post some of my shots that I have done the best with, and I'll post those now. Okay, so yeah, those were images that have sold really well for me. Some of them I mentioned in a previous video on best-selling images that I've had, and so it's nice that Edinburgh has helped with that. Yeah, and then as far as images that haven't gone well, I'll just post up a bunch of those right now that sort of I kind of expected would do better, but just really didn't provide much of anything, and maybe that's just because of the numbers of images out there, are just maybe they're not as good as I thought they were as travel images, or as images that are capable of selling a location. So I'll put some of those up here in a second, but and I'll just end the video on that. So thanks for watching this. Hope you got something out of this. Hopefully this will help you with your travel photography, particularly as it relates to building a Microstock portfolio. If I earned your subscription, please subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, take care.